It was a scorching July afternoon when Maria Gonzalez, housekeeper for the Richardson family for only 3 months, heard inhuman screams coming from the mansion's driveway. Running to the window, she saw a scene that froze her blood. Little Emma, 7 years old, was trapped inside the luxury SUV under the blazing sun, her tiny hands desperately pounding on the windows while screaming for help. Her stepmother, Victoria, was casually chatting on the phone just feet away, completely ignoring the child's cries. The billionaire father was on a business trip and knew nothing. As the temperature inside the car rapidly climbed toward deadly levels, Maria realized she had only minutes to save Emma's life. But what she did in those critical moments not only saved the child, but also uncovered a shocking truth that would destroy forever the reputation of Manhattan's wealthiest family, revealing a murderous plot that no one expected. Maria Gonzalez was 32 years old with a past she preferred not to discuss. When she responded to the job posting for a position with the Richardson family, she knew she was entering a world completely different from her own. The mansion in Manhattan's Upper East Side was an 18th-century townhouse renovated with modern luxury, surrounded by manicured gardens that rivaled those of Versailles. Robert Richardson was one of America's wealthiest men. His financial empire spanned real estate to technology, and his name regularly appeared on Forbes's richest Americans lists. He was 45, had been widowed for 3 years after his wife died in a plane crash, and had a 7-year-old daughter, Emma. 3 months before that tragic July afternoon, Robert had married Victoria Sterling, a 30-year-old model he met at a charity gala. Victoria possessed breathtaking beauty, platinum blonde hair, ice blue eyes, and a body sculpted by hours of gym sessions and cosmetic treatments. But behind that perfection, Maria had begun to notice something deeply disturbing. From day one, the housekeeper realized that Victoria treated Emma not as a stepdaughter to love, but as an obstacle to her new, luxurious life. The child, sweet and introverted, still had nightmares about losing her mother, and instead of finding comfort in her new family, she found herself increasingly isolated and neglected. Robert, blinded by love for his young wife and overwhelmed by work, noticed nothing. When he was present, Victoria played the part of the perfect stepmother, full of false attention and plastic smiles. But as soon as he left the house, her true character emerged like lethal poison. Maria had noticed the disturbing signs. Emma was often left alone for hours. Her meals were scarce and cold. Her requests for attention were systematically ignored. The child had begun seeking refuge in the housekeeper, who was becoming her only source of affection and protection. The morning of that terrible July day, Robert had left for a 3-day business trip to Chicago. Victoria had organized lunch with her friends and decided to bring Emma, probably to look good as a caring mom. Maria had a bad feeling, but couldn't imagine how far that woman's cruelty would go. The lunch took place at an exclusive restaurant in Midtown Manhattan. Victoria spent the entire time ignoring Emma, talking about shopping and travel with her friends, while the child sat silently eating a plate of cold pasta. When they returned home in the early afternoon, the outside temperature had reached 100 degrees Fahrenheit. The Mercedes's air conditioning had made the trip bearable, but what would happen next was unthinkable. Victoria parked in the driveway and got out with her shopping bags, talking animatedly on the phone with one of her friends. Emma, tired and drowsy from the heat, had fallen asleep in the back seat. And here, the nightmare began. Completely absorbed in her phone conversation, Victoria literally forgot about Emma's existence. She locked the car with the remote, automatically activating the alarm and sealing all the windows, and headed toward the mansion while continuing to laugh and chat. Emma woke up after about 20 minutes, when the car's interior had already begun transforming into an oven. The windows were hermetically sealed, the air conditioning off, and the sun beat mercilessly on the dark roof. The child began calling for help, then pounding on the windows, then screaming with all the strength she had. It was then that Maria, who was organizing laundry on the second floor, heard those desperate cries that would change her life forever. Maria dropped the sheets she was folding and ran to the window. What she saw took her breath away. Victoria's black Mercedes was parked in the driveway, windows closed with the sun beating mercilessly on the body. Inside, Emma was visibly panicking, her small hands desperately pounding on the glass, her face already red from excessive heat. Without losing a second, Maria rushed downstairs, her heart pounding frantically. In the living room, she found Victoria, comfortably seated on the white leather sofa, still on the phone, laughing at a joke. She had a glass of iced champagne in her hand and seemed to have no concern in the world. When Maria shouted that Emma was locked in the car, Victoria looked at her with annoyance, as if she'd been interrupted during an important moment. She responded in a bored tone that the child was sleeping and shouldn't be disturbed. Maria insisted on the mortal danger of the heat, but Victoria dismissed it, saying it was just a little warm, and that she would get the child after finishing her call. The housekeeper looked at Victoria with disbelief. She couldn't believe a person could be so indifferent to a child's suffering. But she had no time to argue. Every second that passed could be fatal for Emma. When she asked for the car keys, Victoria categorically refused, reminding her that she was just a housekeeper and that Emma was her responsibility. She threatened to have Maria arrested if she dared damage her Mercedes, but Maria was already outside in the garden with a kitchen hammer in hand. Emma saw her coming and began pounding even harder on the glass, tears streaming down her sweaty face. The car's internal temperature must have exceeded 120 degrees Fahrenheit. With a precise blow, she broke the rear window of the Mercedes. The crystals shattered, and hot air rushed out of the passenger compartment like from an open oven. Emma was semi-conscious, breathing heavily, her skin red and sweaty. Maria pulled her out of the car and immediately carried her to the shade, to the garden gazebo. She removed the little girl's sweat-soaked shirt and began bathing her face and arms with water from the fountain, speaking gently to calm her. The child clung to her like a lifeline, trembling despite the heat. She whispered in a hoarse voice that she had been so scared and couldn't breathe. Victoria finally approached, but instead of showing concern for Emma, she was furious about her damaged car. She complained about the cost of the window and threatened that Robert would immediately fire Maria. The housekeeper looked up at her and for the first time couldn't contain the contempt she felt. She explained that the child was about to die, but Victoria continued to minimize, saying she was just a little overheated. Maria stood up, still holding Emma in her arms, and explained that the child was suffering from hyperthermia, and that another 10 minutes would have been fatal. Victoria paled slightly, but quickly regained her composure, concluding that anyway nothing serious had happened, and that the important thing was that her car had been destroyed. Maria remained in the garden with Emma, giving her small sips of water and waiting for the child to recover completely. It was while caring for Emma that she made a decision that would change everything. She could no longer remain silent in the face of such cruelty. She had to talk to Robert. But first, she had to gather evidence of what was really happening in that house when he wasn't there. In the hours following Emma's rescue, Maria realized her position in that house had become extremely precarious. Victoria looked at her with manifest hostility and had already begun formulating her version for when Robert returned. Maria had overreacted to a normal situation, destroying valuable property out of pure hysteria. But Maria knew the truth, and she knew that without documented evidence, Robert would never believe her. He was in love with Victoria, and the idea that his beautiful wife could be capable of such cruelty would seem absurd to him. That evening, after putting Emma to bed, she began her silent investigation. From Victoria's computer, which the woman often left on, she discovered conversations that revealed her true nature. Messages to friends where she described Emma as dead weight and an obstacle. emails with her lawyer discussing strategies to get rid of the problem. The most shocking discovery was a chat with a man identified only as M. The messages revealed that Victoria had planned everything. She didn't love Robert, she loved his fortune. In one of the most chilling messages, she wrote that the child would eventually have an accident because children are fragile, especially when they're depressed. Maria photographed everything with trembling hands. This wasn't negligence. It was premeditated murder. Continuing her research, she found that Victoria had consulted websites about domestic accidents affecting children, food poisoning in minors, and survival times in overheated cars. The previous day's episode hadn't been a mistake. In Victoria's bathroom, she discovered a vial of colorless liquid without a label and powerful unprescribed sedatives. But the most terrifying discovery was an agenda with all of Robert's trips marked with red X's and notations like opportunity and time window. The next trip was to New York, 4 days. Next to the date, Victoria had written in red, "Final solution." Time was running out, but fate offered her an opportunity. Robert called saying he would return 24 hours earlier than expected. Victoria didn't know yet, and this gave Maria the idea to definitively expose the true nature of Emma's stepmother. The morning Robert was supposed to return, Victoria seemed more nervous than usual. She kept checking her watch and phone, as if waiting for something specific. Maria, who now observed her every movement, noticed she had prepared a special tea for Emma, mixing in something she took from her purse. When Victoria called Emma for breakfast with a honeyed voice, Maria quickly intervened, saying she had already prepared cereal and fresh milk for the child. Victoria insisted she had thought of making something special, an herbal tea that was very good for children. When Maria asked what type of herbs, the answer was vague: chamomile and other relaxing herbs, because Emma had been very tense lately. Maria took the cup and discreetly smelled it. There was a strange, metallic odor that had nothing to do with chamomile. She said perhaps it was better if the child drank only milk that morning, since she still had a delicate stomach after the previous day's heat. Victoria grabbed the cup with a force that made the saucer rattle, reminding Maria that she was the lady of the house, and that Emma was her responsibility, not the housekeeper's. Maria firmly replied that she wasn't her mother, and that she wouldn't drink that cup. For a moment, the two women stared at each other in silence, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. Then Victoria regained her composure and smiled, saying maybe she was right, and that milk was better. She poured the cup's contents into the sink, but Maria managed to save a few drops in a small glass that she quickly hid in her pocket. The rest of the morning passed in apparent calm, but Maria felt Victoria was preparing something. The woman continued making private phone calls, moving away whenever the housekeeper approached. Around noon, Victoria announced she had to go out for errands and would return in the afternoon.
Enjoying the story? Give it a little like, and don't forget to subscribe. Now then, let's carry on.
The tone sounded more like a threat than an instruction when she told Maria to watch Emma carefully. But Maria had other plans. As soon as Victoria left, she called Robert and told him she needed to speak urgently about his wife and Emma. She explained that Victoria was trying to harm the child and that she had proof. After a long silence, Robert asked if she was sure of what she was saying. Maria confirmed that the day before she had left Emma locked in the car under the sun, and if she hadn't intervened, the child would have died. And that morning she had tried to make her drink something that wasn't chamomile. Robert said he would arrive immediately and asked her to keep Emma safe until his arrival. But Victoria returned earlier than expected. She entered the house with a determined expression Maria had never seen before. She carried a new purse, larger than usual, and held it tight to her chest, as if it contained something precious. She asked where Emma was, and when Maria replied she was taking her afternoon nap, Victoria said it was perfect, because it was time for her and the child to take a little trip. There was a quiet place she wanted to show her, where no one could disturb them. Maria positioned herself between Victoria and the stairs, saying she didn't think Robert would agree, and it was better to wait for his return. Victoria replied that Robert wouldn't return until the next day, and that what they would do would remain their little secret. When she started up the stairs, Maria stopped her by grabbing her arm. Victoria broke free violently, reminding her she was just a housekeeper, and threatening that if she didn't get out of the way, she would meet a bad end too. The mask had fallen completely. Before Maria was no longer the charming wife Robert had married, but a dangerous and unscrupulous woman. When Maria said she wouldn't let her touch that child, Victoria opened her purse and pulled out a syringe filled with a transparent liquid. She explained it was for Emma, but she could use it on her too. A very powerful sedative that would make her sleep forever. Maria backed away, her heart pounding frantically. But just then, she heard the sound of a car in the driveway. Robert had returned. Victoria heard the noise too and paled. Quickly, she hid the syringe in her purse and recomposed her expression, threatening Maria not to say a word about what she had seen. But it was too late. Robert had heard the agitated voices and was already climbing the stairs, 2 steps at a time. When he asked what was happening, Maria took courage and spoke the words that would forever change the Richardson family's life. "Mr. Robert, your wife was about to kill Emma." The silence that followed Maria's words was deafening. Robert looked at his wife with disbelief, then at the housekeeper, then back at Victoria. His face showed the internal struggle between love for the woman he had married and the growing awareness that something terrible was happening in his house. When Robert said he hoped Maria had very solid proof for such a serious accusation, the housekeeper pulled out her phone and showed photos of the messages she had discovered on Victoria's computer. She explained that his wife had planned everything from the beginning. She didn't love him. She loved only his money. And Emma was an obstacle to her plans. Robert took the phone and began reading. As he scrolled through the messages, his face grew increasingly dark. Victoria tried to snatch it from his hands, but he stopped her with a sharp gesture. Victoria attempted to defend herself, saying Maria was crazy with jealousy, in love with Robert, and wanted to destroy their marriage. But Robert continued reading, and what he saw was deeply disgusting him. Plans to get rid of the Emma problem, poison research, the indifference shown when the child had been in mortal danger. When Robert showed her one of the most compromising messages asking her to explain it, Victoria stammered that she could explain everything, but he asked her to explain what she meant when she wrote that Emma was dead weight, why she had researched poisons for children, and why the day before she had left his daughter to die in a boiling car. Victoria tried a different strategy. She threw herself on her knees before Robert, pretending to cry. She said she didn't really want to harm her, but that child hated her, and she didn't know how to behave. The car episode had been a mistake. She was distracted. Robert looked at her with disgust, replying that his daughter was about to die while she was worried about a phone call. It was then that Maria pulled Victoria's purse out and extracted the syringe. Robert examined it and asked his wife what that liquid was. Victoria denied knowing what it was, claiming Maria must have put it in her bag to frame her. But her voice betrayed the desperation of someone who knew she'd been caught. Robert immediately called his trusted doctor, who arrived in 20 minutes. After analyzing the syringe's contents with a rapid test, he confirmed the worst fears. It was propofol, a very powerful anesthetic that would have been lethal for a child Emma's size. It was then that Victoria completely collapsed. The weight of evidence was too overwhelming to continue denying. With an expression of pure hatred, she turned toward Maria, accusing her of ruining everything. If she hadn't interfered, she would now be Robert's only heir. That child didn't deserve to live anyway. She was just an obstacle. Robert looked at her as if seeing a monster, asking how she could think of harming an innocent child, his daughter. Victoria angrily replied that his precious daughter was all that stood between her and a life of luxury without worries. And if that meddling housekeeper hadn't interfered, it would all be over now. Robert stood up slowly, his face pale, but his eyes filled with cold anger. He ordered her to leave his house immediately, threatening to call the police if he saw her near his daughter again. Victoria protested, saying she was his wife and had legal rights, but Robert replied not after what she had done. His lawyer would handle the marriage annulment, and then he would press charges for attempted murder. Victoria furiously gathered her things, throwing objects around and continuing to threaten both Robert and Maria. But when Robert threatened to immediately call the police, she understood the game was over. Before leaving, she turned one last time toward Maria, threatening that it wasn't over between them and that she would make her pay for ruining her life. Maria calmly replied that she had ruined her own life. She had only saved that of an innocent child. When Victoria left, Robert sat heavily, his face in his hands. He wondered how he could have been so blind, and how he could have put his daughter in danger by marrying that woman. Maria told him he couldn't have known, that Victoria was very good at hiding her true nature. Robert replied that she had understood everything and had seen what he couldn't see. The housekeeper explained she had only done her duty, protect those who can't protect themselves. At that moment, Emma appeared at the top of the stairs, awakened by the agitated voices. She asked why they were shouting and where Victoria was. Robert climbed the stairs and took his daughter in his arms, holding her tight. He explained that Victoria was gone and would never return. Now there were just the three of them, him, her, and Maria. When Emma hopefully asked if Maria would stay with them, Robert looked at the housekeeper who had saved his daughter's life. He told her that if she wanted to stay, yes, but not as a housekeeper, as part of the family. Maria felt her eyes fill with tears. For the first time after years of loneliness, she truly felt at home. 6 months later, life in the Richardson mansion was completely changed. Victoria had been arrested and tried for attempted murder, sentenced to 8 years in prison. Her marriage to Robert had been annulled, and the evidence Maria collected had made the case so clear there was no doubt about the woman's guilt. Robert had discovered that Victoria was part of a network of women who targeted wealthy widowed men, with the goal of marrying them and then getting rid of their children to inherit everything. The private investigator he hired had found 2 other victims in Europe, and Victoria was now wanted by Interpol as well. But that was the past. Robert had decided to focus on what really mattered, his daughter and the woman who had saved her. Maria was no longer a housekeeper. Robert had hired her as house manager and Emma's personal tutor, with a salary that allowed her to live with dignity and independence. But more than that, she had become the mother figure Emma had lost, and that Robert had never hoped to give his daughter again. One November evening, while helping Emma with math homework, Maria heard Robert stop at the study door. He watched them for a moment in silence, a sweet smile on his face. Robert entered the room and confessed he had never felt so happy since his wife died. Emma agreed, saying she was also happy because Maria made her feel safe. Robert approached Maria and told her he didn't know how to thank her for what she had done. She hadn't only saved Emma's life, but had saved his too. Maria gently replied that the past was past, and now they should look to the future. Robert spoke precisely about the future, explaining that he knew the situation was unusual. She had come there to work, and instead found herself saving his family. But now he couldn't imagine his life without her. He confessed that in recent months he had begun to feel something for her. It wasn't just gratitude, but something deeper. He loved the way Emma made her laugh, how she got her hands dirty without shame, how she had learned to see beyond appearances. Emma, with typical childhood innocence, asked if Daddy wanted to marry Maria. Robert laughed and said he hadn't intended to ask her in front of Emma, but since they were there, he asked if she would marry him. Not out of obligation, but only if she felt something for him. Maria looked into his eyes and saw a man completely different from the one she had known 6 months before. More human, more present, more capable of truly loving. And she realized she had also begun to feel something for him. She told him that when she arrived at that house, she thought she only needed a job. Instead, she had found a family. And yes, she felt something for him, something beautiful and true. When Emma asked if this meant yes, Maria confirmed while Robert kissed her gently. The child shouted with joy, hugging both and exclaiming that now they had a real family. A year later, Robert and Maria married in an intimate ceremony in the mansion's garden. Emma served as flower girl, proud of her role, and happy to finally have a mother who truly loved her. During the ceremony, while exchanging vows, Robert whispered to Maria, thanking her for saving not only Emma's life, but also his soul. Maria replied, thanking him for giving her the family she had always dreamed of. That evening, while putting Emma to bed in her new room, the child said something that moved both of them. Calling Maria Mommy for the first time, she asked if she thought her real mommy in heaven was happy that she now had her. Maria stroked her hair, assuring her she was very happy, because she knew she was now safe and surrounded by love. When Emma asked if the bad woman would never come back, Robert guaranteed they were just the three of them forever. The child smiled and closed her eyes, serene for the first time in years. Robert and Maria stayed there for a few minutes, watching the child sleep peacefully, knowing they had built something wonderful from the ashes of a narrowly averted tragedy. Maria thought that sometimes the most beautiful things are born in the darkest moments, and sometimes it takes just one person's courage to save a life and change an entire family's destiny. Hit, like if you believe that true love and protection of the vulnerable can always triumph. Comment which moment of the story touched you most. Share to inspire those who believe that even one courageous person can make a difference. Subscribe for more stories of families formed by love, not just blood. Sometimes it takes just a brave housekeeper to expose evil and protect innocence. Sometimes the real family is the one you choose, not the one you inherit. And sometimes the purest love is born from the desire to protect those who cannot defend themselves.